the webcast that's coming to you live from Apogee headquarters in San Jose, from the L.L.Bean headquarters in Portland, Maine, and from the Apogee offices in Bangalore. So my name is Arvind Jain, and we are here today to talk about our solution around digital commerce and talk with L.L.Bean about how they've implemented their commerce solution and their API platform. This webcast will be available to you on our YouTube channel, as well as all the slides will be published on SlideShare. And we'd love to invite you to join the Apogee community to interact with us and ask us questions. In fact, Chris from L.L.Bean is an active participant in the community, so we love for you to interact with all of us. So on that note, let me introduce Chris Kleva and ask him to say a few words about who he is and what he does.
Hi, my name's Chris Kleva, and I work at L.L.Bean in Freeport, Maine. I've been working in e-commerce pretty much my whole career. I started off, back in the early 2000s, 1999, working on retail apparel websites, and have been lucky enough to see the industry evolve over that time and really be involved in it. And we, L.L.Bean started their API platform journey about 3 years ago. We've been working very closely with Apogee throughout that time, and I'm just really excited today to share our experiences and learn about the Commerce API X.
Excellent, thank you. Let me introduce my colleague, Senthil Doraiswamy, who, if you could say a few words about yourself.
Thanks, Arvind. Hey, this is Senthil here. So I work in the product team in Apogee. It's almost a decade in Apogee, and it has been a great journey for as a company, as an individual, from where the APIs and where the APIs are now. Right, APIs have become ambiguous now, and right now we are focusing. I'm personally focusing on vertical solutions, and that's the reason I'm here.
Okay, thank you. And my name is Arvind Jain, as I mentioned, and I work on the products team at Apogee, as well as working with Senthil and his team around the vertical solutions that we've been introducing over time. So today in our webcast, we'll keep this rather interactive, but wanted to just cover some of the key topics, which are talk about the state of APIs in the retail industry, along with understanding the journey that L.L.Bean has gone through as they've built out their commerce platform over the years, and then introduce you to the Apogee Commerce Apex solution that we'll talk about a little bit later. All right, so many of us think of digital commerce having originated in the mid-90s when companies started publishing websites, and with companies like Amazon starting to sell books online. But arguably, digital commerce actually started many, many years before, when one of the early companies published their first mail order catalog. And in fact, L.L.Bean started with their own mail order catalog over 100 years ago. So in many ways, L.L.Bean is a company that's traveled through this entire journey themselves into this modern economy. So Chris, as a person at L.L.Bean who's responsible for the API platform, how do you think about digital commerce, and can you describe the journey you've gone through over the years?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this slide embodies really what's going on. I mean, especially when you're working with a company with 100 years of marketing experience and catalog experience, there's a lot to live up to, and there's a lot of aspirations for the future. So, like you mentioned, we started our first website back in 1995. That has changed quite a bit. I think the second slide there, the second image there, shows what we looked like in 2001, and now we're moving into this age where we're building mobile apps, and we're building in-store apps and lots of marketing apps, and really, trying to envision what the store of the future looks like. It's somewhat of an online, omni-channel perspective, not to throw out a keyword at all. But I think the key here is that, we started off building APIs primarily to meet the mobile use case in a very traditional way, but APIs have been around in our business for many, many years. I mean, longer than I've even probably been alive, that I've been alive. we've had these here at our inside of our business, and it really came about 3 years ago when we started understanding like, hey, if we really pay attention to what these designs looked like, and we really tested these APIs very, very well, and we made them ready to be consumed, we could accelerate that future vision. And I think that's really what we've been able to accomplish. But it's been a lot of hard work, and it takes a lot of focus to get there.
Yeah.
So.
It seems like we've gone through a cycle where companies would bring their consumers into the stores to sell products, and that shifted into enabling them to buy those same products from their home and eventually mobile devices. But now the trend, especially for the companies that have a physical presence, is to try to bring the consumers back into the stores and enable a better experience where you can not only personalize it in the store, but then improve the cross-selling opportunities.
And I think to add to that too, the solutions that you use nowadays to perform that, they're from many, many different companies. It's rare now that you talk to a retailer and they do all of their own personalization, all of their own recommendations, et cetera. So really, I think the value for us with APIs is that they offer us a way to connect all of these third parties, but still allow our app developers to interact with us in a very standard way.
So what we've seen, when we look at some of the market statistics as well, almost a quarter of revenues today across the retail industry are being driven by digital channels. And no surprise, mobile tends to be a significant driver of that. And 9 out of 10 companies are actually increasing spend in mobile application development or mobile enablement. But we actually saw when we did some research among our customer base and looking at a variety of different retailers that there's still a significant number of companies, almost 2/3, that are still early in that journey of digital enablement of their commerce platforms. And some of the challenges that companies have faced as they've embarked on that journey, once they decide that we need to enable online commerce or mobile commerce, the ultimate goal for every company is, you want to attract customers, sell products, and keep those customers so you can keep selling more. But now the means and the media changes, and the phases and the challenges that companies face are still the same, where you want to improve engagement and improve the overall margins of your business. And many companies that are introducing better engagement and better services are also trying to do things around enabling flexible pickup and delivery options where you want to enable customers to buy online and come into the store to pick up the products so you can actually try to sell them more products that they may not have thought of. How does this relate to some of the challenges you've encountered and L.L.Bean as a company has seen over the years?
Yeah, I think this embodies our journey very much so. And the thing I would add to what you said is that, all these style challenges faced, but yet the timelines are a lot shorter. Before we had months and years to sort of meet these challenges and solve these problems, and now we have days and weeks. So the ability to take an issue and turn it around and solve it in a very short, compressed timeline is very much the way we have to operate now. So I think, like a lot of folks, we started off with mobile, and in order to get an app up, we didn't have a whole lot of time. So we had to figure out how do we take these services that we've been building up over the years and leverage them and really a new economy and a new way to build apps. And that's continued to evolve over the time. So we've had to, adapt with when that need for velocity starts to extend over into retail, or when it starts to extend to our marketing systems, or when it extends into our security areas where we need to be able to react and sense any kind of activity that may be happening in the fraud scenario. So I think overall, the reason why we are so passionate about APIs is really because it's an enabler to provide business value at a very rapid pace. And it was important very early on, I think, to impress upon folks that we could do that. I mean, being a service person here inside of a large organization, a lot of times it just comes down to having good personal relationships and telling folks, hey, the API program is here to help you be successful, and we're going to do whatever we can to eliminate the friction to that success. And not only saying that, but also continuously delivering on that promise. And I think that's what happens over time when you're solving these problems and you're facing these problems, is that you really need to focus on that core promise of continuous delivery and that core promise of adding value to every product you're involved with.
Did that change the way people thought about selling, or the types of services that could be introduced by now thinking in a more agile, more rapid delivery type of a environment?
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, I think it started off being a situation where we have, for example, we have one checkout or one way that people can buy products from us, and then as those challenges came up, hey, we need to compete with our competitors, we need mobile apps, we need to be able to sell products in a very fast, sort of condensed way. We needed to meet those challenges not only by providing those APIs, but by getting them to folks in a very short, friction-free way. So yeah, most definitely.
Okay.
I think a lot of what we pride ourselves on the API team at L.L.Bean is that we have a very narrow core competency, and we repeat the same thing over and over and over again. So we've really, on our team, we've built up this muscle memory of how do we work with external developers, or how do we work with third-party APIs, and I think over time, if you're doing this right, you build that core competency, and people start recognizing you for it. So I'd give that advice to anybody is say, hey, try to be a student of APIs, and not just your own, because sometimes those are easy, right? But the ones coming from Facebook or Google or XYZ vendor, I mean, you have to be a student of those as well, because there's lots of folks on your internal systems that they need help consuming those. And if they look at you as someone who can enable that and sort of accelerate their own consumption, then overall, at the end of the day, you're going to have many more APIs, and you're going to be able to build many more apps that depend on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that actually is a good segue into the next slide, where looking at what are the different types of APIs that are built out by retailers. And when we looked at our customer base, and our customer base is significant, where the amount of traffic that is being pushed out through almost over 700 APIs that are just built out by all the various retailers, that's driving over 80 billion calls of traffic per year. We found some common patterns, and here's a list of 20 API patterns that existed across multiple API platforms among our customers. And while there were many other proprietary APIs that are probably used for internal services, these there were some very clear patterns that many of the retailers tended to offer. And looking at Chris, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to ask. Like I look at this list of verbs that you had in the previous slide, and how do you think folks? How did you guys come to that list? I mean, I know that not everybody calls their own API the cart or the shopping cart, or what did you do to come up with that core set of nouns, if you will, that you felt represented commerce?
Sure. So take cart, for example. Some companies call their cart API cart, others call it basket, others call it something different. So we looked for terms that were corresponding to each other and grouped them together to fall into one category. So it took quite a bit of effort, and then searching through and filtering out the ones that didn't make sense. So there were certainly, after doing some initial analysis, there were false positives that we tried to eliminate. And I'm sure, there are probably others that weren't named based on a recognizable pattern, that are probably also servicing the same function. But when we look at it holistically, these are the types of services that make sense if you're trying to build a business to sell products and engage your consumers. And we tested it out and spoke with a variety of companies who have API programs and asked them to critique it and tell us, does this make sense? And it did. From the people who were responsible for their own API programs, they said, yeah, this list is a good starting list, or in fact, it's bigger than a starting list because not every company has built out all of these APIs already.
Yeah, I have to say, I look at this list as somebody who's been, doing this for 3 years, and it's very, very much validating to me that, okay, yeah, I think we may have been traveling in the dark before lots of folks were doing this, but it seems like we landed at a logical place that everybody else did. So that's great.
Yeah. And I switch to the next slide where I've color-coded some of these APIs to correspond to different types of use cases. And the encoding here is, again, based on some discussions with some of our customers where we tried to understand, when they built out a gift card API, what was the purpose of that? Or, when you have a notifications or promotion API, why were you building them out? And so we've created these specific use cases where the blue set of boxes represent the core set, those that pretty much everyone starts with whenever they start building out their API program. And then the other sets of APIs come in over time as the needs emerge from their marketing departments or their sales teams in trying to improve the overall engagement or the quality of service that they can offer to their consumers. And so, whether it is around engagement or loyalty or improving the payment experience, there are different sets of APIs that can come in over time.
Yeah, that's one aspect that I've been curious about. I know when we first started out our journey, we built out a list of 30 APIs that we wanted to build. And at that point, it sort of felt that we were going to build those in sequence. Like we'll start off with the product API, then we're going to go to the card API, and basically, have a very linear path throughout the journey. Did you find that folks were doing that same thing? Like they knew the order at which they were going to build the APIs well before they started them, or was it much more ad hoc based on the needs of the business?
Yeah. So the first set of APIs, the ones that are in the top left quadrant, pretty much those are the bread and butter set that everyone starts with. But where they go from there depends on their needs. So I'll give you an example of one of our customers that's a department store where their initial set of APIs were built because they wanted to offer a better native experience through their mobile apps. So they needed to expose some APIs that for their mobile app team. So again, you want to show product, location, allow you to take orders, and manage the user profile. So those blue set of APIs were the ones that they started with. But then over time, they had a loyalty card that they would give to their customers that those customers would scan in the store. So they wanted to extend that loyalty program into their mobile app. So they started building out APIs to support loyalty program and then improving the checkout experience. And so the types of APIs that addressed checkout. And now the kinds of initiatives that they're addressing have to do with providing a better omni-channel experience, so to say, better journey between the apps, the website, and the store, so managing the user profile, managing their social interaction, and doing push notifications to bring users into the store. So again, depending on the needs of the business, they're building out the APIs in that sequence. So here's an example. Again, one company, which while as a business it's a very large company, but the first experience that they wanted to offer their mobile users was something very simple and direct. And so the sets of APIs that they built out were the ones in the leftmost column. The basic set of capabilities that enable users of their mobile app to search for products, customize, place an order, and take delivery. Then, when we look at a situation like yours, for example, you have a lot more APIs that you've built out, and certainly over the many years, as you said, you started this program quite early on. And so, if you think about all these different APIs that you have, are there some that are used by all applications, or are there some that are used by only some applications, whereas others that are used by others?
I mean, I think it kind of comes down to, like you mentioned before, it's the needs of the business. So, the top, most needed API is always authentication, getting access to the API. So all apps use that, whereas product, it depends. I mean, if the application is displaying product, like a mobile app or a mobile website, in that case, they would use that API. But in a retail scenario, you may be doing more customer profile or more information about what's going on right in that face-to-face interaction. So I think a lot of it depends on, do you have the API already available, and can it be reused? And that's always a win-win for everyone. I know, especially when you think about the payments and fulfillment API, so the ability to actually buy a product and put it in the cart and check out. I mean, as a retailer, the more apps we can have allowing people to put products in carts and check out, the better we're doing at our jobs. So I'd say that's probably the most common one across all of the apps, is the ability to see products added into your cart and then check out. Whereas when you get into the more of the mobile, the marketing use cases and the retail use cases, they're a bit more specific. But one thing that I think is interesting about the marketing use cases is in those scenarios, you're most often dealing with third parties. So you're trying to get information from Twitter or information from various social networks, and really feed that into how do you interact and engage with your customers. So it depends, again, the business need, and really evangelizing the point that, okay, if we really have a good understanding of this particular API and how we can lower the friction to consume it, then it'll be something that we can use in this particular instance, but also reuse in the future. So a lot of the strategy, I think, for a retailer that's being successful at this is, they're looking at what their core business plan is and what their core competency is and what they want to accomplish as a business, and then saying, all right, well, how can APIs enable that? And, what sort of strategic partnerships do I need to make with third parties to offer these services, or what sort of back-end system changes do I need to make to expose these capabilities for external consumption? And I think that's where we're at today now. I mean, I feel, as opposed to a few years ago, I feel much more included into the conversation very early on, and it feels great to have a business person sort of equate an API, be talking to a vendor and saying, hey, this vendor's great, but what's even greater is that they have a good API. Like, hearing that come out of a business person's mouth, like, puts a huge smile on my face, because it's like, oh yeah, you're getting it. It's not just about the UI and what they show you in the sales presentation. We really need to be able to program this vendor. We need to be able to interact with them across channels. So really, the strategy is all about delivering business value and then helping folks understand how do APIs actually accomplish that.
So do you still find a world where the app team initially would have gone out and said, hey, I want to connect to Twitter, so I'm just going to go create an account on Twitter, get their keys, and use that API directly, as opposed to coming to you and saying, hey, I need to connect to Twitter. What's the best way to do it?
Yeah, we still see a fair amount of that, and I wouldn't say that that's a bad thing generally. I mean, I think we've gotten to the point now where some of our app developers understand the value that they'll be getting by consuming a facade versus the API directly. A lot of ways it comes down to just visibility on what's going on between the client and that third party. If you're interacting with third-party API directly from your client, you may not have a whole lot of visibility on that client's service level agreement, what their response time is. You may not be satisfied with the way that third party secures their API. So a lot of ways it's become a bit natural but also we have to be careful not to delay the development process. I mean, sometimes there's cases where, we have a third-party API that we're consuming and the app needs to be built right now and we're not quite ready with our facade. So in those sort of situations, we do have to, be a little bit more sensitive and again, talk about the core value of the developer. And over time, we've built out a lot of competencies to improve that too. So there are situations where, we know we're going to use this third-party API, but it's not built yet. So working with APIs and a lot of the tooling that we've built over the years, we've been able to build mock services and really enable development to happen prior to that target system to being available. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, initially, yes, there was quite a bit of friction around, hey, I just want to go out and use the Twitter API directly. I don't see any value in using the facade that you're going to create, and you may be slow at doing that, so that's going to slow down my project. But over time, I feel like, again, it comes down to just, continuously delivering that value, having very good ways to estimate how long you expect something to take, and having great documentation and great testing where folks start to really, just by natural progression, they get to the point where it's like, okay, yep, I understand the value and I can see in a real physical, tactile way how you're going to help me get there. And I hope that we're able to continue that. I mean, 5 years from now, we may want to have this conversation again and ensure that we don't become this overbloated sort of governance body that makes everybody consume our facades. But at the end of the day, it really just comes down to, developer-to-developer interaction and making sure folks are happy with the level of service you're providing.
Yeah. So before we switch over to talk about the Commerce Apex, I wanted to ask another question that came in from someone in the audience. And, if you think about a variety of APIs, some of them that are used for internal consumption that are providing, service access to some backend system, and then those that you publish externally, perhaps as products for external teams. Do you think about, how do you start managing them? Do you start with internal APIs first, or do you go, to external APIs and manage them centrally?
I think a lot of that depends on your own business and really where you feel like you're going to get the most value right away. For us, it's been primarily around external consumption. L.L.Bean has been building internal services for many, many years. So at the end of the day, what we need to figure out how to do is take those incredible investments that we've made and breathe new life into them, just because the rest of the world's speaking REST now. So we have, plenty of SOAP-based web services, plenty of systems that are already available to be programmed, but now we have to figure out a way to sort of wrap those up and make them consumable to external app developers, because those are really the guys that are, becoming our core propulsion, is the folks that are able to build apps in their core competency. I mean, we don't have a lot of internal really great Android developers, for example, or really great iOS developers. So enabling them to help us is our core competency. But I think I can see that evolving over time. I mean, I think especially when we think about retail use cases is that, those are somewhat of an internal only kind of connection, and you need to be able to support that. But that's been a bit more of the exception recently. But it is, we are turning that corner. We're getting more into the internal only consumption. But we definitely started out all external. And it really came down to like, okay, we need to be able to build these apps to compete, and how are we going to do that? Okay, we're going to do that by enabling our development team to elastically scale while still having a lot of the core systems in place that we've had for many years.
Okay, let's switch over to Senthil. Senthil, do you want to show your screen to go over the Commerce Apex?
Yeah. Thanks, Arvind. You're able to see my screen?
I think it's just...
I just want to make sure. Yeah.
Yep, can.
Thank you. So let's spend some time, next 20 minutes, talking about Commerce Apex. I've not having a lot of slides. I have like 3 or 4 slides just to introduce the concept, and we spend a lot of time on seeing what is the solution, how it works, right? So the primary objective of an APA accelerator, APAX, is to accelerate the development or rollout of an APA project in a given industry, right? So to do that, what we are doing is we are building out solution templates, right, that consist of an open API, alias previously it is called Swagger, right? So open API definitions, along with an API implementation, right, so that people can understand how to model an API definition. For example, how do you model an order, cards, and things like that. This is not, we are not trying to push a standard. We understand that there is always an edge. Even the API definitions are becoming a selling factor, right? So we are trying to just bootstrap and take you to like 80%, a 20% differentiation is something that you can always do on top of this template, right? So apart from this API definition and template implementation, we also provide a tailor-made developer portal for that industry, right? And as well as a bunch of documentation, what we call it as smart docs, which allows developers to learn about API in interactive fashion, which you will see shortly with them, right? Apart from the APIs and the portals and the docs, we also build a sandbox, which you can. It's a good start for you to play around your API definition instead of going and changing the backends or schemas, right? So we also provide something that it's not like we are putting REST messages own. We are based on our customer feedbacks like L.L.Bean and other partners that we work with, and our own in-house experts on the vertical. We build this solution, right? And we also understand that this is not a full stop, that we build a solution and this is a golden standard. We expect a lot of contribution from the industry, so we are making this as open source so that there is a good exchange of ideas of how to take this forward, right? So with that introduction on what is Apex, let me also talk about what the different Apex that we have done so far, right? So far we have launched 3 Apex, the first one being Health Apex. Health Apex, as the name says, it revolves around healthcare industry, right? It is based on FHIR standard, FHIR standard, which stands for Fast Health Interoperability APIs, REST APIs, right? So this is created by a group of healthcare industry people, and we are actively working with them to implement this particular solution as Apex, right? So that has been, we have learned quite a bit from the industry body and the health service, and we have opened that aspect, right? The second one is Identity Apex. Identity Apex is basically an authentication solution based out of OpenID Connect standard. Additionally, it also supports a Mobile Connect standard, which is used for mobile authentication by the telco operators. Right now, this particular standard of Mobile Connect by GSMA is cutting across various parts of the world, can authenticate around 1 billion subscribers, right? The third solution that we rolled out is Open Banking Apex, which is based out of the banking industry, right? So the primary driver for the solution has been the European Union and UK financial regulators to reduce the burden on the customers and give more and more data to the customers. So they have defined a couple of standards like what is called PSD2 and open banking. These are not standards, these are more of directories. So we picked up the directories and worked with some of the industry and partners to define APIs that is going to help banking industry to expose their data and payment transaction to third-party developers, right? So these are the three solutions that so far we have launched, and today we are also launching Commerce Apex. As name suggests, Commerce Apex is primarily focused on the retail industry, right? And if you look at it, go to the next slide, what this Commerce Apex is all about. Commerce Apex, as I previously said, any Apex solution consists of a set of APIs, a dev portal, and a sandbox. In the case of Commerce Apex, what we have built is APIs like product, search, cart, stores. If we go back and look at what Arvind has presented in the state of APIs, so we have taken a set of APIs that are critical for any retail, right? We have taken that as in the first phase, and that's what we have built as Commerce Apex. We are having solid plans to add pretty much all the APIs that Arvind, the top 30 APIs Arvind has mentioned. It will be available in the Commerce Apex pretty soon, right? Not just about exposing the APIs, it's also about, it's very, very important that you get the access right? So this particular API supports both internal and external app access through the same API definition. What we mean by that is the same API implementation, but it has different facades of based on whether an internal app is accessed or an external app is accessed. Right, so security models are defined in such a fashion that you have investment on the API, but you get multiple values, right? Especially when you are looking at external app access, and especially if you are looking at exposing users information like orders or cards, that it's important to have a consent support through OAuth. So we also, these solution also support that out of the box. Right. So this is on the API side. On the portal side, so we have built the portal with a Drupal framework, a popular open source framework, right? And on top of it, we have added the smart doc definitions for all the APIs that you are seeing on the API thing, so that the user can or a developer can easily interact and understand the APIs, right? So additionally, it also have API monetization and analytics of developer research. We will see about that pretty soon. I will show you the demo on these things, right? So the last thing is on the sandbox. The sandbox is pretty flexible. We kept it. We know this is these APIs are not in the stone. So we have created a flexible sandbox so that you can change the request response formats. You can change the data that is held by the sandbox in a very, very easy fashion, right? That's on the
there are a couple questions.
Yeah,
there are a couple questions. Let me just ask, get into one of them. So one question is there thinking about when to use Apex and when not to use Apex? And what's your thought about that?
So the question is when to use Apex, when not to use Apex. So I can. So
yeah,
when to use Apex is. Go ahead, David.
Well, maybe I can outline that a little bit. I mean, as a retailer, you know, I definitely took note when the Health Apex came out and Open Banking Apex came out, and a lot of that was, you know, it was obvious. Like, okay, well, the healthcare industry needs to interoperate. That's a key function of their business, and banking's the same way. But as retailers, a lot of way we need to differentiate ourselves from each other sometimes in order to be competitive. So there's not as much of a value for everyone to have the same product API, or even for us to see that. I mean, there's a lot of value from the app developer perspective, especially if you're a company that specializes in building mobile apps. It'd be great if everybody's product API looked the same, or at least folks are brought to a jump start. So is the Apex really, when we talk about, you know, when we should use it and when we shouldn't use it, is it primarily to sort of say, okay, well, here's what you should do from a design perspective if you don't have anything starting off? Or is it more here are the best practices that we feel that folks that have succeeded at this are doing. Maybe you start off here, but then you heavily customize based on, your own business and what makes you different?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, right? If you're starting off brand new, then it's always easier to look at a reference point and extend from there. And that's one of the objectives, where we want to accelerate your time to market with your API platform and ultimately, the apps that are going to consume those APIs. But if you already have APIs in place, which I'm sure many companies do, then this gives you a sort of a vendor-neutral way to compare and see, am I building out things that may be more common across the industry, or am I missing something? So it gives you, again, another reference point to benchmark yourself and introduce capabilities that suit your business and customize them for your specific needs, but with a common starting point.
That's perfect. I wish that was there when we were first starting out, because you spend a lot of time, looking at the folks' APIs, but then also looking at your core systems and trying to figure out, hey, what's the best way to design this? So having, especially somebody speaking, we have lots of APIs already, so how do we benefit from Apex? And that sounds like a great way to take advantage of it, is, use the community essentially to bounce your ideas off of on your design, but yet, know that you want to differentiate yourself in some meaningful way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very likely that, the data model that you have, the system that you're going to connect to are going to be very different. So in fact, Senthil, when you were building out the APIs in the platform, you thought about that, and you created APIs that were consumption-based, that consumers of the API see, but then there are other APIs on the back end that allow you to build those connections to the back-end systems. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So that kind of naturally push me to the next slide, the architecture slide. So this solution is built on top of Apigee Edge platform, right? So if you look at it, there is a bunch of APIs that present here, product, search, cart, things like that. Each of those APIs, and what we call internally terminology called proxies, are split into two layers, right? One we call it as a northbound proxy. The other one we call it as a connector proxy, right? So the northbound proxy's primary responsibility is to enforce policies like OAuth, analytics, quota enforcement, which are extremely consumer-oriented, or the API consumer-oriented, whereas the southbound connector proxy's primary responsibility is to mediate, to pull the data from the backend, mash it up, and normalize the data so that it can be easily exposed, right? So that's how we model, so that we can keep the speed at which the backend moving and the API exposure layer moving at a different speed, right? And let's go and look at. I will show in the demo itself how the connector proxies and these proxies are organized, right? So in the demo, we will look at two flows, right? So one is primarily from a developer viewpoint, app developer viewpoint, right? How he uses the dev portal or developer portal to understand the APIs, right? Let's start with that, and then the second part of the demo, we look at how an API developer can develop these things, right? So if we go to the browser, right? So this is the open commerce sandbox, that is portal that is available, right? It is available at opencommerce.apigee.com. So if you look at it, it is a standard developer portal with a bunch of capabilities like API catalog, developer community, a section on overview that kind of gives an overview of the program, right? Let me quickly jump on to the API tab, right, which is primarily gives you a list of APIs, right? So you can see a bunch of APIs like products, collections, search, orders, carts, things like that, right? So to an extent, we can split this kind of API into two varieties, right? The one is like collection search belongs to non-user APIs, right? There is no user association with that, right? Whereas orders and carts, there is a user association with that. So to explain the concept, let me show you a couple of variants of the demo, right? So let me start with first with the store, right? Store is a non-user oriented, right? So it needs a two-legged OAuth or a client credential-based authentication, right? To achieve that, first let me go and invoke OAuth API to get a token and use that token in the stores API, right? So let me go ahead. This is the API where it is running, and I need to fill in some header parameters. So let me quickly do that. So these are the sample credentials that we have given in the portal. So when you use this portal, you can very well use these credentials and try out these APIs, right? So I send the request. To try this out, you don't need to register, right? You need to just try it out without registering. If you want to have more functionality, then you have to register yourself, right? So I send the request for a /token with time credential. I got a token back, right? I'm copying this token so that I can use this in the storage. So I'm using the storage where I'm using the search store, right, which is a generic search which supports various base query like postal code, city, latitude, longitude, various things like that. Let me keep it without any parameters so that it returns all. I'm just giving a generic authentication, right? Bearer and the token access token. So I send a request. I get the response of list of store. So what I have done is basically I have got an OAuth client credential access token, which does not require user consent, right? So this is because its store does not have user data, right? So I got the token, I gave the token to the APIs, and then I got the response. Now let's go back and look at an API which is has a user data, right? So the moment you have a user data, like orders, right, it's important that you get the consent of the user, right? To do that, you do a three-legged OAuth to achieve it. So as part of this is the entire thing I'm showing here is the smart doc interface of our developer portal, right? So this particular API requires a user authentication. So when I click on it, it gives me a screen, right? First I ask an end user, I have to authenticate, right? Once I authenticate myself, then it asks for a consent, right? So the smart doc order, which is the app step, is requesting you a permission to share the order source. Are you okay with that, right? As an end user, if I say I'm okay with that, right, then that's the interface law, right? So let me see again. So when I get the authentication done, all right. So now I have a token with the user token with the consent. So now I'm sending across a request that comes back with the list of orders for that particular user, right? So there are two things that we need to observe. Using this token, exactly, I got this token as end user simple. I cannot take this token and get the data parameter. That enforcement is captured, right, within the API layer, right? So number one. Number two is also with this token, I cannot go and get information about cards, right? Because this is something that I've got only orders, right? So there is a good balance here, right? So this is about the API. So what we have done is we have applied various security and also the API, right, as part of the solution. Now, is there a question?
Yeah, I just want to interject. Your voice is becoming a little choppy, so let me add another comment here. And since we're also coming close to the end of our session, to complement the developer portal, we also have the entire solution available for download on our GitHub site. And that includes all the OpenAPI definitions and the proxy implementations for all these APIs, right, along with an implementation of the developer portal. This is, so for those people who want to access the download of the entire package, that's available on our GitHub site, as well as this developer portal can be accessed at opencommerce.apogee.com.
So what are you expecting the collaboration model for this to be like? Is this open for anybody to contribute to, or is it going to be sort of heavily governed, or how do you expect this project to sort of evolve over time?
Yeah, so we've published this on GitHub under the Apache license. So we want to distribute this freely and have anyone download and use it freely without any restrictions. So you can modify it and extend it in any way you want. And because it's on GitHub, we are open to taking contributions. So anyone who wants to extend it or offer additional APIs that you believe would be valuable for the overall community at large, then we're very welcome to having you do a pull request, and we will look at any contributions that the community has to offer. So one question just about the Apex solution, Sentinel for you, is one question was, what's the difference between the order API and the cart API? So just in the last couple minutes, if you could address that.
So cart is equal to a basket API, right? So you start the items in the cart, right? So you have adding the item, putting the cart into that, right? So once the cart is converted into an order, then it's into order, right? So the cart is transient in nature, right? So orders has a lot more financial importance compared to a cart, right? So cart is just somebody can just add the cart and then the database can go, right? Whereas orders have a definite life cycle associated with the user.
Okay, great, thank you. I put up on the screen a few links where we've got information about the Commerce Apex, as well as a report that actually was published a few months ago, which was called the State of the APIs report. And there's a very simple and easy to use benchmark for anyone who has APIs to compare your own APIs against the combination of APIs that we've seen among our own customers and the level of maturity along the digital journey where they exist. So you can specify the APIs that you have already and compare yourself to see how far along these different use cases you lie. So I don't know, Chris, did you have a chance to try out the benchmark?
I did, and I was happy to say I could check most of the boxes. That was good. I'd say one piece of feedback I'd have is, the guys who've been doing this for a few years now, they look at all those boxes and they're like, yep, sure, I got each one of those, but I think we're really looking to dig down a little bit deeper. Like, okay, well, I have a product API, but I can create products and I can get products. So in some ways, this is great for folks starting out, and I think that's definitely the key to help jumpstart people to get to maturity. But as the big boys start competing against one another, we're going to look for depth here.
Yeah, of course. And the whole point of this is to start a conversation. And if there are questions that you have around what are the right things to do, we're happy to engage and offer any advice or even provide some guidance on where we see companies at large and how we see them applying APIs to their different use cases.
Great.
So with that, I thank everyone for attending this webinar, and just wanted to make a last plug for our upcoming conferences that are going to be rolled out around the world, starting with San Francisco. And we hope if you're in the region, you register and attend. And thank you very much, Chris, for taking the time to join us on this webinar. And thank you, Senthil, for going through the Apex solution and showing us a demo.
Great. Thank you very much. It's been great to be with you today.